Hello and welcome to On the Topic. Let's get topical. I'm Dan.
And I'm Alex.
And this week we're going to get topical by talking about urban legends.
We've had this one on the roster a while, haven't we? Since I think it's beginning of this year, we have a list of podcast episodes we want to cover, and this one was right up there because we did the Mandela Effect, and we've done what else we did last year?
Conspiracy theories.
And this kind of feels in that wheelhouse. So we thought, well, let's kick off with a different one, urban legends. So, Dan, I am going to talk you through what an urban legend is, but also I think it kind of links into folklore. Okay. So, urban legends or urban myths, urban tales, is a genre of folklore, apparently, comprising stories circulated as true, especially having happened to a friend or family member. Often horrifying or humorous elements. So this is essentially a story that people hand down and say, oh, my mate's had this happen to them, or I've heard about this. It's always someone who's very close to you, or someone that isn't quite directly attributed, but you know has been impacted by something that's happened. So far, so good. And I think it's fair to say, Dan, as we go through, a lot of these actually kind of share the theme. I think we've talked separately off air that a lot of these urban legends we've seen, or folklores, they're quite dark, aren't they?
Oh yeah, I mean it gets really sort of weird, a bit creepy.
Yeah.
I've got a bit of a dark story that goes with one of mine. But when we get there, it's quite sinister. It's not nice. I'll be honest.
I have to put some kind of disclaimer on the beginning of this episode. But so apparently these legends can be entertainment, but often a concern about a mysterious peril or troubling events, such as disappearances or strange objects. They could also be a confirmation of particularly moral standards, or reflect prejudices, or having a sense of social anxiety. So this is perhaps reflecting the world around us and the people that share our society with us. Now, urban legends are most often circulated orally. As we know, that's where most stories originated from back in the day. They were stories handed down through the generations. But because of where we are today with social media, some actually go a lot quicker, and they become a lot darker. As we know, the internet, the World Wide Web is a bit of a Wild West. So where things might take a couple of years to snowball and to change and to gather up pace, actually in the day of digital media, as we know, a couple of topics I'm going to talk about, Dan, they get very dark very quick and get a whole far-reaching kind of audience. That's urban legends. So similarly to folklore, these consist of myths and legends. Now I'm going to, as we go through this episode, talk more specific about, I guess, regional UK folklore and urban legends, because I think there's some interesting stuff there that perhaps, even you perhaps don't know, Dan. I've learned through this some really interesting kind of regional folklore stories, and perhaps those who are part of the UK are listening from abroad, they may find this of interest, or perhaps get under the psyche of us Brits and just how mental we actually are. Now these are English folklore can encompass things like Robin Hood or King Arthur, but there's other things like the Beast of Bodmin Moor. You know the Beast of Bodmin, don't you, Dan?
Yeah, that's how it rings. It's sort of often talked about, especially when we were kids.
Yes. There was often stories in the 80s and early 90s of a wild cat, a big hulking black cat that stalks the moors. And of course, in that part of the world, which is near the west coast of the UK, it's bogland, it's quite damp, it's quite wet. You don't really expect wildlife of that sort to be there. Mainly sheep, not panthers or big cats. So you tend to hear those types of stories handed down through the media. People take snaps, even Loch Ness Monster, right? That's a folklore or an urban legend. So as we go through, Dan, as you said, you'll touch on some dark, perhaps more modern takes on urban legends. I'm going to throw in some kind of UK traditional ones, English traditional folklore. And by the end of it, hopefully we haven't scared too many people, but we've enlightened and perhaps we've got an interest in in perhaps doing another volume, because I think it's going to be a volume 1, isn't it, Dan? I think there's plenty more to investigate and to cover as the weeks and months progress.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think we've already had a request for a volume 2 for conspiracy theories as well. So
immense.
On the list of episodes to come up. But I mean, I suppose that's sort of relevant to the name change as well. We don't necessarily have to concentrate on the pop culture side of things. We can sort of break out of that now and visit things that aren't, well, I guess topical.
Yeah, and it could be anything, as I said, it can be today urban legends, folklores. It could be, I think it's an interesting couple of ones. We could revisit Star Wars, on the topic of Star Wars. What needs to change in order for it to be successful again? Where's its spark? We captured at the end of the previous episode with Howard, but looking ahead, what does the next steps hold, and what needs to change? We can talk about anything. So at the end of the episode, we've got some brand new contact details. If Dan can remember, I think we've made him uniform now, haven't we? So they're all the same. So no more dots, no more dots or underscores. They're all the same. So it'd be less convoluted for Dan to remember. But nonetheless, we'll give you some brand new contact details. And by all means, let us know. If you've got a topic that you want to cover off, we can now do so. The shackles have been released, and we can talk about near enough anything. So please do get in touch.
Exciting times.
Most definitely. But today, we'll talk about urban legends and folklore. Do you want to kick us off, Dan?
Yeah. So my first two are actually from the listener. So first up, we're visiting Twitter with Hugo Post Podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Who requested we talk about El Chupacabra. Now, anyone unfamiliar with El Chupacabra, it's the Spanish pronunciation for goat sucker, not a euphemism. So chupar means to suck, and cabra is goat. It's a legendary creature in the folklore of parts of the Americas, with its first purported sightings reported in Puerto Rico. The name comes from the animal's reported habit of attacking and drinking the blood of livestock, including goats. So, Alex, what does this creature look like? Like, I can tell you. Physical descriptions of the creature vary. It is purportedly a heavy creature the size of a small bear, with a row of spines reaching from the neck to the base of the tail.
Wow. The
most common description of the chupacabra is that it is a reptile-like creature, said to have leathery or scaly greenish-grey skin and sharp spines or quills running down its back. It is said to be...
So it's like a member of the Illuminati, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if people want to revisit the conspiracy theory, it's probably one of their pets.
Yeah.
I mean, let's chuck that on Conspiracy Theories Volume 2. Let's talk about El Chupacabra being one of their pets.
Do it.
It's quite a big creature as well, Alex. I mean, I'm 6 foot. This creature is approximately about half the size of me, so it's 3 to 4 foot. And it stands and hops in a fashion similar of a kangaroo.
Oh, wow.
It does have another common description. It's described as a strange breed of wild dog. This form is mostly hairless and has a pronounced spinal ridge, unusually pronounced eye sockets, fangs and claws. Sounds like Wolverine. Unlike conventional predators, the chupacabra is said to drain all the animal's blood and sometimes organs, usually through 3 holes in the shape of a downwards pointing triangle, or through 1 or 2 holes. I mean, it's a bit weird, isn't it? Like, does it have like a triangular pattern of teeth in its mouth?
Yeah, it's odd. I mean, I'm just googling it now, Dan, because I've got to refresh memory. Because I liked all this stuff. I was growing up. I was a bit of a sad kid, as I'm sure you can probably guess. And just looking at this, and I mean, a lot of the artwork and the supposed inverted commas photos, they all have like a common theme. So it looks like some kind of like a malnourished dog, dare I say, or some kind of feline. But others then also have this kind of dinosaur-esque kind of alien type creature crossed with a dragon. But I mean, there's different themes of it, as you say, but they all seem quite consistent, which is odd for an urban legend or a myth. in theory, these are made up, but a lot of these tend to be quite consistent, which would suggest there's something, well, not something in it, but there's something still that might be around there that resembles a cross between the two, perhaps. I don't know.
I mean, sightings as well. I guess, I mean, we could sort of put the internet in there that it allows people to sort of spread these rumours, and it goes a bit mad. But I mean, originally it was claimed to have been spotted in Puerto Rico, and it's since been reported far north as Maine and as far south as Chile, and even being spotted outside the Americas. Now, we're visiting countries like Russia and the Philippines, but many of the reports have been disregarded as uncorroborated or lacking evidence. Sightings in northern Mexico and southern United States have been verified as candid dogs afflicted by mange. Now, according to biologists and wildlife management officials, the chupacabra is exactly as it is, an urban legend. But the first reported attack eventually attributed to the creatures occurred in March 1995. So we're not going far back at all, really, when you think about the 90s. Back in Puerto Rico, where 8 sheep were discovered dead, each with 3 puncture wounds to the chest area and reportedly completely drained of blood. Now, a few months later in August, an eyewitness, Madeline Tolentino, I think I've got that right. I mean, we all know how bad I'm pronouncing names over the course of this podcast.
Consistency, Dan, consistency.
Reported seeing the creature in the Puerto Rican town of Canavanas. Again, this is way off my pay grade. Can't pronounce these things. So if I got this wrong, please correct me, listener. When as many as 150 farm animals and pets were reportedly killed. Now, in 1975, similar killings in the small town of Mocha were attributed to El Vampiro del Mocha, the vampire of Mocha, which is as it's pronounced. Initially, it was suspected that the killings were committed by a satanic cult. Later, more killings were reported around the island, and many farms reported loss of animal life. Each of the animals were reported to have had its body bled dry through a series of small circular incisions.
Yummy.
I mean, we can go more recent as well, if you wish, Alex.
Why not?
So, only 2 years ago, in October and December of 2018, there came many reports of chupacabras suspects in Manipur, India. So again, we're breaking this mould of not being in just one place. Many domestic animals and poultry were killed in a suspicious manner, as chupacabra does. Many people said that they had seen the species with their eyes. However, forensic experts said that there were absolutely no sign of these creatures, but it was just street dogs. And they were responsible for mass killings of domestic animals and poultry after studying the remnant of corpses. And finally, in October 2019, a video recorded by Mundo OVNI showed a supposed attack on chickens in the Seburaquillo sector of Lares, Puerto Rico. This creature gets around.
It does, and it stays the test of time. It's still kicking around. I mean, it could just be, mangy animals and wildlife, but all the attacks seem to be quite, demonic and dastardly, don't they? They're all quite consistent.
So, in my opinion, I don't think this creature quite exists. I think it's probably, as you say, like just manged dogs, possibly, or just like the wild dogs in India. But I mean, what's your thoughts? Do you think this creature exists?
Probably not, Dan. It's as we said, it's probably some kind of animal, probably a sick animal of some description, and the horrific injuries are probably man-made, like I would suggest. And it's just a story that continues throughout the age that gets people talking. But that's us being sceptical, right? But in absence of any kind of or evidence, there is a consistency, which tends to be some kind of domesticated large animal, and they always are. But I doubt there's some kind of winged animal or spiny animal roaming the earth, sucking blood. But hey, what do I know?
I mean, I suppose it'd be interesting to see how we think about these urban legends, if they're real or not. Because I think there's one that I'll be mentioning a bit later, which I think there's probably some basis to it. I think there's probably something there.
I know where you're going with it. I think you're probably right.
So what have you got for the UK? Because, I mean, we discussed mine sort of off air, but I don't really know where you're going to go with yours.
Yeah,
I've got excited to learn about some of the UK urban legends.
Yeah, well, they're quite odd. As a lot with these urban legends, they are quite strange and they are quite dark. Now, I'm going to touch on two, I guess, for each of my sections. So I'm going to first of all cover off much of England. So there's a couple that go up and down the UK and the Green Isles of England. And one of them is the black dog. So I guess similar, Dan, to what you just mentioned about the chupacabra. This one manifests itself in a number of different periods and a number of different stories throughout the UK and England specifically. But it tends to be what's referred to as a motif, an image, a representation of a demonic entity. They tend to find it is scattered throughout folklore, British Isles. So it tends to be a black dog. It's essentially comes out at night, so it's a nocturnal apparition. And in some cases, it even shapeshifts. And it's said to be associated with the devil. So it's a shape-shifting dog who's been tasked by the devil. But you all may almost recognise it as a ghost or a hellbound. Or hellhound, shall I say. Now, apparently it has the appearance regarded as a portent of death. So it's supposed to be larger than a normal dog. And again, we're seeing consistent themes down with yours, chupacabra, and here with the hellhound. And large glowing eyes. Apparently, it sometimes is associated with electrical storms, which is odd. But also with crossroads and places of execution and ancient pathways. And a lot of these urban legends of folklore from the UK tend to be pagan traditions. So before Christianity really took a hold in the UK, people celebrated the elements and the sun and the moon. And what you tend to find is a lot of this to do with the four humours and to do with, go back to school now, Dan, I'm not sure if you remember medicine through time for our GCSEs, but there's elements of that goes through English folklore, and they tend to associate hounds, undomesticated animals, as images of evil or reckoning. And the black dog continues throughout English folklore. Now, interesting enough, it's always to do with places of eeriness, as it says here, execution, or crossroads, where you're not too sure which direction to go in. You're usually chased by this animal, or it's hunting you down to kill. Now, interesting enough, it's always there as some kind of image or kind of apparition. It doesn't tend to attack people. Unlike the chupacabra, of course, where you've got the puncture wounds and you've got the blood and you've got the drained animals and the Indian livestock. This tends to be a little bit different. But when we talked about the Beast of Bodmin Moor, again, that's another version of the black dog. And you have that throughout, as I say, English folklore, and it rears its head as it goes through. But another more specific one, Dan, have you heard of Drake's drum at all?
No.
No, I didn't either. So this is after
familiar with this one.
Yeah, so Francis Drake, so the guy who pilfered and pillaged the Spanish and was this is a bit of history lesson now. This is why On Topic is so good, because you can learn, listener, as we go through this journey of interest and delight. So Sir Francis Drake was tasked by Elizabeth I, who's one of the best monarchs of all English history. Come fight me. The only reason I say it's because I did a master's in it, but she is a phenomenal character to read from the English monarchy and history. Anyway, she tasks him, unofficially mind, to go out and steal the gold of the Spanish. And as we know, at that time, the Spanish were a superpower. So they had far reaches across most of the world, and they were seafaring, and they were so good at riding the seas, they would hit and run countries, and they had basically their fill of the world. And Sir Francis Drake would intercept ships, pillage, or go to settlements and try and trade or steal their gold to take back to the crown. So anyway, Drake's drum is to do with this chap, Sir Francis Drake, and he had a snare drum apparently. So apparently, shortly before he died, he ordered this drum that he had taken with him throughout the world to be taken to a place called Buckland Abbey. Now, I don't know Buckland Abbey, I'm not sure if you do, Dan, but it's a place anyway. And he vowed that if England was ever in danger, someone was to beat that drum, and he would return to defend the country. Right. So it's not. It is a bit of a departure from the bleak, kind of dark nature of an urban legend, but nonetheless it's still folklore. And apparently, according to legend, it can be heard to beat at times. So people allegedly can hear this beating, this sound, in and around Buckland Abbey when England is at war, or when there are significant national events that take place that threaten the security of the nation.
Interesting.
So if anyone lives anywhere close to this place called Buckland Abbey, and you think you've heard this drum, get in contact, because it's very, very interesting. But yeah, people strain their ears, and if you put on Sky News or BBC World News or whatever, and something's happened, apparently you can hear this drum, and it's Sir Francis Drake, I guess, coming back to protect the British Isles, or his English people back from the dead. Bit of an odd one, and it is obviously specific to a particular region of England, but that's Drake's drum. But as I mentioned before, the black dog is a consistency. I guess a lot of cultures have the black dog, and the association with evil or dread or the devil. So there seems to be a consistency that runs through a lot of these stories of an apparition of some description. But yeah, those are my first two that I didn't know about, although I knew of the black dog. I didn't know its roots. And I've got a couple more as we go through, Dan, that might pique your interest about the UK and just how weird and wonderful we are.
Okay.
But otherwise, what have you got next?
Next up, we had Louise, who wanted us to look into Tupac in Cuba.
Tupac.
Yeah, Tupac. So apparently he's still alive and he's very much living his life in Cuba.
And he's still releasing music. If you keep your eye open for release, I think either his estate or something associated with him released unheard of previous footage. So must have did like Michael Jackson stuff. I think a couple of years ago. So there's newish content out there, Dan.
Okay. Well, apparently he's very much alive, breathing, eating, drinking. As you do. 100%. And this is claimed by a British bodyguard who says he smuggled him there. And this was reported back in 2018. Now, Michael Nice has sparked more theories by claiming he was part of the security team tasked with helping Tupac escape Las Vegas. Now, as we all know, he was famously shot on Las Vegas Strip back in 1996, where apparently he died as he was leaving a Mike Tyson fight, and he was only 25 years old. But the identity of the chart-topper's killer has remained a mystery for more than 20 years, and no charges have ever been brought. So it's a mystery. Since then, the conspiracy theories, there's those words, conspiracy theories, that he actually survived the shooting and faked his death have continued to spread, including a photo that emerged on the internet in 2017. Now, Michael Nice, I'm just going to call him Mikey. Now, Mikey has now sparked more theories by bizarrely claiming he was part of a security team tasked with helping Tupac escape Las Vegas. He told TMZ, "Why do you think nobody has been arrested if they said they were the one that killed Tupac? Because Tupac is not dead. If he was dead, they'd be arresting those dudes for murder. He's somewhere smoking a Cuban cigar on an island." Now, Mikey claims he was part of a security team for the Black Panthers political party in the 1990s. He says the group heard about the hit being put on Tupac, and the order went out to get him to a hiding place. Now, Mikey says the rapper was only injured on September the 7th, 1996, and was rushed out of the country. He said, "It was me, my brother, the pilot, Tupac, as the co-pilot, and 2 Panther guys on the jet. We took off and immediately knew we were safe. We felt good, and it was like escaping from prison. There were hugs and handshakes when we finally managed to get him to Barbados. Then my brother helped him get to Cuba from there." Now, this is where it gets a little bit weird, Alex. Apparently, fellow rapper Gaddafi's still alive. And he was there in Barbados greeting them with all kinds of hand signals. He looked kind of funky, describes. "I saw them alive way after their said deaths." Now, for anyone unfamiliar with Gaddafi, I didn't know about this chap. But apparently he was found slumped on the 3rd floor stairwell of a New Jersey apartment block after being accidentally shot in the head. The latest sighting came after the internet went wild 2 years ago after claims Tupac had been photographed apparently living a new life in Cuba. I mean, do you think he's alive? Do you think this is another Elvis?
Well, Elvis, we know, was taken by aliens, so it's not quite the same. But I mean, look, I think statistically, everyone's got a doppelganger. Someone who looks very, very similar to you is basic genetics, and people's genetic code. So even though you may not look the same or identical, you could look very, very similar. So it stands to reason there could be people out there that look very much like Tupac and are in different parts of the country, and perhaps, I'm not saying play up to the urban legend or the myth, but perhaps don't dispel the rumours because it may not be in their interests because they look like a famous person. So I probably think that, and again, I think a lot of these things, there are elements of truth. Either they're glimpses, or they're things that got out of hand, or they're Chinese whispers that have developed and snowballed. And there is no doubt that someone looks very, very similar to Tupac that perhaps is in Barbados, in that part of the world, to say. But surely with today's modern digital means and far-reaching kind of social media, if he was out there, I'm pretty sure he would have been snapped.
Yeah.
No? I mean, if you're a member of TMZ, MTV, I don't know, Anonymous, the hacking group, anyone would offer something in order to prove that these people were around. So for him to still be out there and incognito, I just think it's highly unlikely. It's a very nice story, and I vaguely remember Tupac getting gunned down in the US. It was on the news, and I didn't really know who he was, but I do recall it was all over the TV at the time. And it's sad. When anyone dies, it's sad, and it's no different to Tupac. It was just quite evident and quite graphic, I think, in the way it was being portrayed on TV at the time, because he was a celebrity. Same with Biggie Smalls, right? It was similar. These were larger life characters who unfortunately met their untimely end at gun violence. But I suspect sadly, for me, I think it's just that. I just think that people wanted to hold on to something more than what it is. Unfortunately, a very sad instance. I hope I'm wrong. I really do, and I hope there is Tupac chilling, smoking cigars and drinking rum or whatever in Barbados. But I think it's probably a sighting that's probably had a bit of Chinese whispers, Percy Dan.
Yeah, and I think little Mikey here is probably trying to cash in in the newspapers. If I sell a story, then I might get a few bob. As harsh as that sounds, but yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Sad times.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want me to kick up kick off with my next one, or did you want to go next?
I can throw out two more English folklores. So we've got the first one. Have you heard of the lubber fiend, the lob, or the lubberkin by any chance, Dan?
No, is it a pumpkin that loves things, or?
Good guess, but not quite. No, this is a legendary creature that apparently is similar to a brownie, not the thing that you eat, or Urisk of Scotland and Northern Ireland. It's of a similar ilk to the Slavic Domovoy and Scandinavian Tomt. So if we have anyone who hails from those regions, they may know what I'm talking about. Apparently it's also been related to Robin Goodfellow and hobgoblins, as best known being mentioned by John Milton. So the lubberkin apparently is typically described as a large, hairy man with a tail who performs housework in exchange for a source of milk and a place in front of the fire. Which is interesting, because if a hairy man turned up on my doorstep with a towel who would do my housework for exchange for a source of milk and a place in front of the fire, I would bite his arm off, because I don't know about you, Dan, but housework just isn't for me, and I'm not a fan of it. So if anyone wants to do it, paid or unpaid, in milk or otherwise, I'm all for it. So if a lubberkin wants to knock on my door, I'm all for it. But apparently one story claims he's also the giant son of a witch and a devil. So there are some kind of demonic undertones, or at least a dark nature to the character. But ultimately, and I'll make reference to this franchise a little later on, but I guess if you look it back to Dobby in Harry Potter, think of it like a house elf, I guess. Someone who's going to do work for you at the cost of perhaps an item of clothing, as Dobby is freed in, is it the Chamber of Secrets?
Yeah, Harry Potter puts a sock in the book.
He does, and Dobby is free. Well, a lubberkin, if you ever come across a lubberkin, a hairy man with a towel, he'll do your hoovering for you and your dusting for some milk and some warmth next to the fire. So just bear that in mind if you're looking for some helping hands around the house. But that's a nicer version, I guess, of the version of the lubberkin. But we're now going to go a little bit darker, Dan, because as we promised, and a lot of my stories actually tend to be a little bit more darker, is the Rat-man of Southend. So Southend's based on, Southend-on-Sea in Essex. Have you heard about the Rat-man, Dan?
No, but I'm already intrigued. Like, all I can imagine is like a 6-foot man that looks a bit ratty.
Not far off, and this is quite bleak. So the story of the Rat-man tells of an old homeless man who seeks shelter from the cold in an underpass. So I guess this is a more modern kind of myth and an urban legend. Apparently he was set upon by a group of youths and beaten to near death. Okay, that's already quite bleak. Cold and losing a lot of blood. Whilst obviously, being beaten by these youths. Apparently, as he died, numerous vermin who inhabited the area, so rats and mice, gathered and were there found to devour his face, which is grim. Apparently, after this, a ghostly figure was spotted in the underpass, same underpass where he was attacked and devoured, with people hearing rat-like squealing and scraping as if large claws were moving across the walls. Apparently, he still haunts the underpasses and the dark corridors of Southend-on-Sea, and if you're walking around at night, I mean, I would argue that's probably the least of your worries if you're walking around the UK in underpasses in the cover of darkness. But nonetheless, the scraping and the squealing might well be the Rat-man of Southend. So be on your guard, Dan, if you ever visit that part of the area, because he could well be lurking in the shadows, reminding people of his untimely downfall.
Oh, wow. That's quite dark. You say bleak.
It's quite bleak, People who, and again, these are what you tend to find in these stories, is the innocent, or the innocents which are preyed upon by, I guess, the dark nature of beings or of humanity. And sadly, this particular story tells of someone who perhaps could do with a helping hand. Because in this day and age, Dan, not to spout my own kind of political interests or otherwise. But I don't think we should have homelessness, especially in what we deem as a first world country. It shouldn't be a thing, and sadly it is. And people who are vulnerable shouldn't be preyed upon. So again, you tend to find that in old traditional stories, it's the farm animals, it's the farmers, it's the ladies walking at night who are preyed upon and attacked. Well, in a modern story, it's the people who are unfortunately don't have homes, don't have somewhere to go, the safety, and they're preyed upon. And so I guess that's why we see the iteration of the Rat-man of Southend.
Wow.
But yeah, very dark. So yeah, as I say, be on your guard, guys. If you ever go to Southend-on-Sea, or if you want to go and seek him out, go to the underpasses, because apparently you'll hear the rat-like squealing and scraping. Ugh.
Wow. It's crazy.
Yeah. But those are my next two. How about yours?
Well, I'm going to kick it off with the Slender Man.
Ooh.
Now, I'm going to open this up with a story first. This is real life. I mean, you're not going to like this one. It's quite uncomfortable, actually. And then I'll sort of go into a bit more about the background of the Slender Man and why he's become so popular. Now, back in May 2014, on the 31st, two 12-year-old girls in Wisconsin held down and stabbed a 12-year-old classmate 19 times.
Jesus.
Now, when they were later questioned by authorities, they reportedly claimed that they wished to commit a murder as a first step to becoming proxies for the Slender Man, having read about him online. They also stated that they were afraid that the Slender Man would kill their families if they did not commit the murder. After the perpetrators left the scene, the victim crawled out of the woods to a roadway. A passing cyclist alerted authorities, and the victim survived the attack, thankfully. Both attackers have been diagnosed with mental illnesses, but have also been charged as adults and are each facing up to 65 years in prison. One of the girls reportedly said Slender Man watches her, can read minds, and could teleport. So, already started off quite bleak with this one, Alex. But just to give you a little bit of background on the Slender Man, he's actually a fictional supernatural character that originated as a creepypasta internet meme created by Something Awful forum user Eric Knudsen, also known as Victor Surge, in 2009. Slender Man soon went viral, spawning numerous works of fan art, cosplay, and online fiction known as creepypasta horror stories told in short snatches of easily copyable text that spread from site to site. Divorced from its original creator, the Slender Man became the subject of a myriad stories by multiple authors within an overarching mythos. So you're all probably wondering what the Slender Man looks like. Because of the Slender Man's fictional mythology, he's evolved without an official canon for reference. So his appearance, his motives, habits, and abilities are not fixed, but change depending on the storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
So as we were talking about, the internet is sort of Chinese whispers. It's changed every time it's sort of moved on. He is most commonly described as very tall and thin with unnaturally long tentacle-like arms, or merely tentacles, which he can extend to intimidate or capture prey. In most stories, his face is white and featureless, but occasionally his face appears differently to anyone who sees it. He appears to be wearing a dark suit and a tie, which is really weird. The Slender Man is often associated with the forest, of course, and or abandoned locations. Has the ability to teleport, as one of the girls mentioned in the story at the start of this. Proximity to the Slender Man is often said to trigger a slender sickness. Now, this is, of course, based on paranoia, nightmares, and delusions accompanied by nosebleeds. Early stories featured him targeting children or young adults. Some featured young adults driven insane or to act on his behalf, while others did not, and others claim that investigating the Slender Man will draw his attention. So heaven forbid he comes after me, Alex. Graphic violence and body horror are uncommon in the Slender Man mythos, with many narratives choosing to leave the fate of his victims obscure.
Yeah, I was going to say most... When it originally came up on the internet, most of it tends to be, snaps or stories of people lurking in the woods, and nothing really came of it. I think it's only more recent in the last probably decade that there tends to be, in computer games, and I think there's even a horror film, wasn't it, from 2018 perhaps, where people meet their untimely end in a graphical manner. It's definitely, when I first recalled it, coming to my consciousness, it was always a being always in the foreground, sorry, in the background, lurking, as opposed to any kind of physical interaction.
I mean, there are reasons for his popularity as well. So, media scholar and folklorist Andrew Peck attributes the success of the Slender Man to its highly collaborative nature. Because the character and its motives are shrouded in mystery, users can easily adapt existing Slender Man tropes and imagery to create new stories. This ability for users to tap into the ideas of others, while also supplying their own, helped inspire the collaborative culture that arose surrounding the Slender Man. Instead of privileging the choices of certain creators as canonical, this collaborative culture informally locates ownership of the creature across the community. In these respects, the Slender Man is similar to, campfire stories or urban legends, and the character's success comes from enabling both social interaction and personal acts of creative expression. Although nearly all users understand that Slender Man is not real, they suspend that disbelief in order to become more engrossed when telling or listening to stories. So it's a very dark one to sort of get pulled into.
Yeah.
And so we had the two girls at the start with the story where they actually believed this creature was real and that they were going to come after them and kill their families if they didn't essentially sacrifice someone to the Slender Man. Very weird.
Yeah, and very sad. And that has synergies with the that odd-looking girl on the internet. I can't remember her name. We had it on the socials where people were saying if you don't do something, she would appear. It's that kind of reference. Yeah. The begins with an M. I can't recall what she's called, but it's that.
Momo.
That's the one, the Momo, and it's all the principle of if you don't do this, or this is what happens if you don't do that, and it's an interesting one, and that story, Dan. The sources, are they from newspapers? When you say it was a real life story, do you know where it hails from?
I found it on Wikipedia, but I'm sure it had links to the actual news references that it would have come from. Yeah,
very sad. But as you say, the internet has this shared narrative that snowballs and changes with time, and I definitely recall it in its early iterations, opposed to the more latter ones, which are of the horror filled kind of apparition which we know now.
Yeah, definitely. It's just all a bit weird.
Very, very bleak.
But I mean, if you want me to move away from the sort of dark bleakness, I've got one about sort of paranormal phenomena.
Let's hear it, Dan. I always like a bit of paranormal phenomena just to lighten the mood.
Well, let's talk about the Men in Black, and I'm not talking about Will Smith or Tommy Lee Jones.
Oh. But hang on, let's just take a quick second. So, your thoughts on the films, Dan?
Number 1 was superb.
100%.
2 was okay.
Correct.
And 3 was trash.
Get in the Sea.
Oh, really? You disagree?
No, as in Get in the Sea, you're 100% correct. I didn't like the whole kind of go back in time and let's not feature Tommy Lee Jones. Tommy Lee Jones probably thought this script is garbage and gave it a thorough swerve. Did you watch the Men in Black International as well? The kind of the
reboot? With Hemi.
Yeah, disappointing.
It was okay. Like, it wasn't great. I wouldn't say it was rubbish either. It was somewhere in between, but it just didn't do Chris Hemsworth's acting any justice. No,
I agree. It's almost like the misstep of Ghostbusters, the all-female cast where he played the receptionist, the turning on his head in terms of the whole storyline. I think he was a misfire in that as well. But
yeah,
good. I'm glad we're aligned. Anyway, we're not talking about those films, even though only one's particularly really good. What are we talking about, Dan?
Well, I mean, it does inspire the films, but when we get there. So in all their different incarnations, the Men in Black usually have one main purpose. Now, that is to muzzle witnesses of strange paranormal phenomena. So we're talking things like UFOs, etc. They almost always wear black suits and hats with dark sunglasses. So again, we're being drawn to the films where, this is how they look. They drive black cars and arrive in groups of 2 or 3. Some describe them as one would an FBI agent, while others recall the MIB as having strange appearances, sometimes with supernatural features like glowing eyes and strange complexions. It is sometimes implied that they may be aliens themselves. The term is also frequently used to describe mysterious men working for unknown organisations, as well as various branches of government allegedly designed to protect secrets or perform other strange activities. The term is generic, used for any unusual, threatening or strangely behaved individual whose appearance on the scene can be linked in some fashion with a UFO sighting. Several alleged encounters with the Men in Black have been reported by UFO researchers and enthusiasts. So I can sort of go a little bit further into this for you, Alex, and our listeners. Folklorist James R. Lewis compares accounts of Men in Black with tales of people encountering Lucifer and speculates that they can be considered a kind of psychological drama. Men in Black figure prominently in ufology and UFO folklore. So we're going to visit the 1950s and the 1960s, where UFOologists adopted a conspiratorial mindset and began to fear they would be subject to organised intimidation in retaliation for discovering the truth of the UFOs. So in 1947, Harold Dahl claimed to have been warned not to talk about his alleged UFO sighting on Maury Island by a man in a dark suit. Now, they end up in a local diner where the man was able to recount in extraordinary detail that Dahl had what he had just experienced. And now he said this: "What I have said is proof to you that I know a great deal more about this experience of yours than you will want to believe." The man said, according to Arthur Graybarker's 1956 book, "They knew too much about flying saucers." Dahl was told not to speak of the incident, and if he did, bad things would happen to him. So a little bit later on, in the mid-1950s, ufologist Albert K. Bender claimed he was visited by men in dark suits who threatened and warned him not to continue investigating UFOs. Bender maintained that the Men in Black were secret government agents who had been given the task of suppressing evidence of UFOs. Ufologist John Keel claimed to have had encounters with Men in Black and referred to them as demonic supernaturals with dark skin and or exotic facial features. Now, according to ufologist Jerome Clark, reports of Men in Black represent experiences that don't seem to have occurred in the world of consensus reality. So, historian Aaron Golias, he wrote, during the 1970s, 1980s and 1990s, UFO conspiracy theorists would incorporate the Men in Black into their increasingly complex and paranoid visions. UFologist John Kill has argued that some Men in Black encounters can be explained as miscast, entirely mundane events perpetuated through local folklore. In his 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies, Gill describes a late-night outing in 1967 at rural West Virginia, where he himself was taken for a man in black while searching for a phone to call a tow truck. I think there's probably some truth in this, Alex, about these Men in Black. And I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
So as we know, Tom DeLonge from Blink-182, Angels and Airwaves, he has To the Stars Academy, and he also runs sort of various like technologies as well. So To the Stars sort of spans off in different areas. Now, he's been researching UFOs with people from the US government for some time, and to the point where actually the US government have actually said like some of the videos that he's released are real. But I read somewhere that he said that he was told that if anyone in a black car came up to him and told him to get in, he was told not to. And to the point where he laughed and was like, you know, this can't be real. Why would I? And they were like, no, seriously, do not get in that car. So there's obviously something there.
Surely that's a life lesson, though, Dan. If anyone rolls up to you, be it in a black car or regardless, and says get in, I think that's just good common sense. But all things aside, it's interesting that he's drawn reference to something like the Men in Black in a real world setting.
For sure. I mean, to be warned by, I mean, potentially people, I guess, in the US government are quite high up anyway. There's got to be something there to suggest these people are real.
And, you know, I think to the point you made, Dan, about recent revelations, I mean, it's the Office of Naval Intelligence, or the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, who have taken ownership of those videos, which Tom has forced out into the public sphere in last month, wasn't it, in July? Yeah. And sure enough, there are organisations which don't profess to be hunting UFOs, but nonetheless protecting the skies or investigating kind of enemies of the state. And there must be in some capacity or some instance where there are representatives of the government who do these investigations and perhaps do rock up to take eyewitness accounts or to do their own investigations. And sure enough, during the time of the 50s, which is the Cold War, there was a lot of kind of suspicion, both in the general populace, but also in the governments about, the Soviets and nuclear war. And so it's conceivable that you would get those kind of organisations or those kind of people investigating or rocking up. So I think I'm fully with you, Dan, as much. I think there are roots in reality about people representing a task force of some description. Now, whether or not I subscribe to kind of Tom's experiences or even Bob Lazar's, who's famously, worked at Area 51 and gave light to this in the 70s and the 80s, remains to be seen. But I do think there is something inherently rooted in reality. Because you don't just get people investigating stuff behind a desk, right? You do have to go and speak to people. You do have to take pictures and take accounts of these things. So I think it wholly makes sense that in somewhere, someplace, those people existed. But whether or not they do still to that extent, because obviously you can do an awful lot behind a desk now compared to pre-internet days, remains to be seen.
Sure. But I mean, I've got a couple of honourable mentions. Unless you've got some more to go through.
Oh, I've got one more, and then we'll go to some honourable mentions, Dan. And if I said to you Spring-Heeled Jack, do you know who Spring-Heeled Jack is?
It doesn't ring any bells for me, Alex. I presume you're going to tell me and the listener?
No, I was just going to move on. No, of course I am, Dan, yeah. Spring-Heeled Jack. So he's someone who lurked in the shadows during the Victorian era. Now, apparently the first claimed sighting of Spring-Heeled Jack was in 1837, predominantly around London, but it does take place across all of Great Britain, going as far reach as the Midlands and Scotland. Now, apparently this particular individual has the ability to be able to launch himself long and far distances, so jumping from building to building, lurking in the shadows, is that kind of feeling or sense of dread that we're instilling here. And there are many theories about nature identity. So the urban legend was very popular in this time, again during the turn of the century. And due to tales of bizarre appearance and ability to make extraordinary leaps, there's been obviously a number of different iterations of this character in works of fiction. But who is he, would you ask? Well, apart from being able to leap from buildings in an inhumane way, apparently it's described by people who saw him as having a terrifying and frightful appearance, as a lot of these urban legends and myths. Apparently with clawed hands and eyes that resembled red balls of fire, so glowing eyes again, Dan, is what we're hearing, these recurring trends. Apparently the reports that were made at the time were beneath a black coat he wore a helmet and a tight-fitting white garment like an oilskin. Alternatively, he could be a guy who's naked, who's just running around, who hasn't seen the sun, needs to be a bit minty, and has a cape. But, whatever. He's got a tight-fitting white garment, apparently. Now, many stories also mention a devil-like aspect. Others say he was tall and thin, with the appearance of a gentleman. Again, similarities to the Slender Man, Dan. Several reports mention that he could breathe out blue and white flames and that he wore sharp metallic claws at his fingertips. And the people said that he was able to speak comprehensible English. Now, skeptical investigators have dismissed the stories of Spring-Heeled Jack as just mass hysteria, akin to, say, the boogeyman or the devil, which being around centuries, or exaggerated by urban myths about a man who climbed over rooftops claiming that the devil was chasing him. Apparently, other researchers believe, though, that some individuals may be behind his origins, so this is where we touch upon perhaps having elements of truth, which have spiralled as people tell these stories around the dinner table to their friends and family, and they spread around the country. Now, apparently, it's believed that imitators later on would impersonate the Spring-Heeled Jack, but it's widely considered not to be a supernatural creature, but apparently one or more people with a macabre sense of humour, so a very dark sense of humour. And apparently this idea matches the contents of a letter packed to Lord Mayor of London, who accused a group of young aristocrats as the culprits after a irresponsible bet and wager. So these rich kids, I guess want a better term in our modern language, had done better to do and had a bet that they couldn't pull this off. Apparently there's evidence to in the letter to the Lord Mayor of London. Now, apparently a popular rumour circulating as early as 1840 pointed to an Irish nobleman as well, the Marquess of Waterford, as the main suspect. However, this only may be because that individual had previous experiences with police officers. So it's a guy who bounces around, lurks in the shadows, has this demonic figure around him and scares people. It tends not to be too much about attacking people, not murdering, not blood-sucking, but nonetheless someone who is lurking, who scares people and catches in the corner of their eye. So it's quite a sedate folklore and legend, an urban legend, but nonetheless, if you are around dinner table or out social distancing, speaking to your friends, you come across the topic of urban legends, talk about Spring-Heeled Jack. It is an old Victorian concept, and interesting enough, it doesn't continue into modern times. And I do wonder whether the turn of the century and improved communication and photographs and moving images and video and now social media and the internet can really put paid to things. But you don't tend to hear any more of this old concept of Spring-Heeled Jack. It tends to be more of a Victorian concept, but potentially with real-world roots of aristocrats playing around or people seeing things and passing on the story and travelling up the country, growing momentum and like a snowball. Every story that's told and new details added. So it's actually quite interesting as a concept of folklore and urban legend. But Spring-Heeled Jack is quite a fascinating one nonetheless. So, that's my last one before we get into... Well, I have 2 honourable mentions. But how about yours, Dan? What have you got?
First off, I'm going to kick off with Spider-Man's girlfriend, or ex-girlfriend, say Gwen Stacy.
Oh, yes.
Now, anyone familiar with Gwen Stacy, she was killed off by the Green Goblin, I think it must have been, the late 60s, early 70s?
Yeah, snap the neck, I believe, Dan.
Yeah, really unfortunate. I mean, I think Stanley always had it in his mind that her and Peter would eventually get together and get married instead of Mary Jane Watson. But alas, in the Mexican version of Spider-Man, apparently she never died. So just for a bit of context, in the early days of comic books, the publishing company La Prensa got permission to publish Spanish translations of Spider-Man comics in Mexico. The comics proved to be such a hit with Mexican audiences that they eventually started publishing 2 comics per month instead of just the one, and eventually overtook Marvel Comics' publishing schedule. Because of this, Marvel gave Mexican artist Jose Luis Duran permission to draw his own original Spider-Man stories and even gave him full creative control. And in one of these original stories, Peter and Gwen got married, even though The Night Gwen Stacy Died had already been published by that point. Contrary to the rumour, that story was revealed to be all just a dream, and its events were never intended to be canon. So a bit of a light-hearted urban legend there.
Yeah, but it's quite interesting, though, that... Do you think that the rights were given so freely, given he was quite a popular character from Marvel and comics?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what to believe on that, because, I mean, if someone's not totally associated with Marvel Comics, you go, well, here you go, you can go do your thing in Mexico, and we'll just keep doing our thing. I think I might have to be a bit of research, I reckon, just sort of that urban legend.
Because you do see that happening across DC and other comic publishers, where the concept of the hero just changes ever so slightly. Their backstory is a little bit altered, and they have a little bit different kind of imagery and ability, but ultimately they're the same thing, dressed up, right? So Superman, a flying superhuman of strength, translates to a number of different heroes across Marvel when he's a DC character. So I guess it's likely that could happen. It's just interesting that the myth says that the rights were given and she continued to live on. But it's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a different world now of comics. I mean, especially when, if you listen to This Week in Marvel, a lot of the writers go away to sort of map out the year and all the big storylines that are going to come up. So I don't think you sort of really give someone full creative control now. But you say there's, depending on the artist and the writer, then you do sort of start to see little tweaks in character storylines. I mean, I love Spider-Man. I mean, he's one of my all-time favourite heroes. And every now and again, you get that slight little difference. You go, oh, that's new. It's cool, but it's kind of new. So what's in your honourable mentions? And then I'll give you one more.
Yeah, so I've got 2. So black-eyed children, Dan. Now I'm not talking about kids who've been beaten up or, having a bit of rough play out in the playground. Apparently, black-eyed kids or children are an urban legend of supposed paranormal creatures that resemble children. Very specific here there, Dan, between the ages of 6 and 16. You heard of these guys?
I've heard of these guys. when I used to work for Tesco, me and one of my colleagues were really into this, like into sort of ghosts and paranormal stuff. And he did tell me a story about these crazy little critters. You're not supposed to let them in your house, but
no.
Then if they've got black eyes, why would you?
Well, quite. I think there's a couple of lessons. If you don't take anything away from the episode, listener, it's don't get into strange vehicles, regardless of whether they're black, coloured or otherwise, and probably stay away from kids with black eyes knocking on your door. But true enough, they're between the ages of 6 and 16, so very specific, with pale skin and black eyes, who are reportedly seen hitchhiking or panhandling, or encounter on doorsteps of residential homes. So as you say, Dan, probably looking to get into your home. Now, tales of black-eyed children have appeared in pop culture since the late 1990s. So when I say modern, there's some people listening to this going, yeah, that's ages ago. It's like 30 years and it shows your age. But it is in recent history as opposed to, some of the things we talked about, which is paganism and Victorian. So yeah, since the 90s, these kids have been cropping up. So that's the black-eyed children. And then another one, and this is going further afield now, going to Japan, Dan. And I'm really going to do a Dan here and mispronounce it, so apologies to any of our listeners who know I'm butchering the language. But it's called a Hanako-san. Apparently it's a Hanako-san. Apparently it's a Japanese urban legend of the spirit of a young girl who haunts school bathrooms. Now, Dan, rewind this podcast all the way back 45 minutes. I mentioned to you a particular franchise. I'm going to mention it again. So I already mentioned Dobby from Harry Potter. This one sounds like another character. Now, apparently this girl who haunts school bathrooms can be described as a yokai or a yurei. Now, to summon her, individuals must enter a girl's bathroom, usually on the third floor of a school, apparently, knock 3 times on the third stool, and ask if Hanako-san is present. Well, in Harry Potter, if you go into the girls' toilets, who is there but a moaning Myrtle? So I'm not saying that, J.K. Rowling, who's been in the news for quite distasteful reasons these days than her storytelling, ripped off the concept, but unless, again, this Hanako-san, which is a Japanese urban legend, has found its way over into Western storytelling. And again, it's just the similar kind of trait of that character being reiterated into a different kind of medium or a different story. But I thought that one was interesting. There's plenty more out there. As I say, I think we'll do another volume, but that one's kind of the voyage into a different cultural background, and I thought that one was quite interesting because, as I say, we've done episodes on Harry Potter before and popular culture and other franchises, and that one rings very close to a particular teenage wizard.
Definitely. I'm going to round this off by visiting the computer game world. I remember from back in 2018 we did some of our favourite computer games. I'm surprised neither of these games really sort of came up in our list, Alex. But going to visit Pokemon.
Oh, right.
Now, there is an urban legend known as Lavender Town Syndrome, which is an urban legend about suicides in the 90s in Japan after kids played the original red and, well, over there it was the green version. We had the blue version, of course.
We did, yeah. Which one did you have, Dan?
I had both, but I was more preferable to blue.
Oh, really? I had red. What's the difference? Was it just different starting Pokemon or different Pokemon out in the wild? There's only a couple of differences, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think it was just like the Pokemon out in the wild. There was only certain like bug Pokemon you get in the red version, then in the blue version it was like the other one, and I can't really remember the differences. I remember like you had to trade with your friends, didn't you, to be able to get 100.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently these kids were driven insane by the song that plays in Lavender Town. A lesser version claims that there are high-pitched tones that cause subtle discomfort and only children can hear them. Now, these were changed in the localised red and blue. While the song is certainly creepy, if there is any brown note, it's in all 4 versions. All the music is bit for bit identical in all the versions. This includes the red and green Japanese versions and the red and blue versions, as well as yellow, which I think was a take on both blue and red, if I recall, but you started off with Pikachu. So, if you're going to play Pokemon, be careful when you hit Lavender Town, you might go mad.
Yeah, perhaps put it on mute until you finish that part of the game. But no, I don't recall that one, and it's an interesting urban legend because, of course, during the 90s, was it 90s? It was 90s that Pokemon was really, really big, and it's had obviously a recent resurgence with Pokemon Go and the Switch. And I guess because so many people are interacting with that franchise, with those games, I guess the stories of dread, of risk in something that is very, very popular and so innocent, with the innocence that the children playing these games, I guess can spark fear in the common man that's listened to these stories. But I mean, I never heard that one before. But very, very dark. Yeah.
Really, it's quite uncomfortable, really, when you sort of read some of these urban legends. Very weird stuff indeed.
Yeah. But from the sound of it, Dan, we've wrapped on Volume 1, and I think we've had an interesting mix. There's a couple there that I was expecting to crop up, which we have, and hopefully I've thrown out some odd curveballs from the British Isles and beyond. But we're going to have to do other volumes, but no doubt we've missed some of your favourites. So we mentioned about Momo, and there'll be other ones out there. So if you've heard of any that we've covered during the course of the episode, you want to add any more, look out for the socials. There's a couple that we'll post in and around the release date of the drop. Feel free to contribute and let us know any of your stories, but also let us know any that we've missed, and then perhaps we can do some more research for Volume 2 probably later on in the year. But with a new podcast, a new name, we haven't just got a new logo or a new attitude. We've always had that attitude. Original sass. No, we have some new contact details, Dan. Do you remember what they are at all?
We do. So we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at On The Topic Pod. We are on Gmail, so you can email us on onthetopicpodcast@gmail.com. And then, of course, we've got Anchor, where you can leave us a voice message and be a part of the show, much like Howard and previous listeners in the past when we were formerly the Weekly Roundup.
Indeed. So all we need to do is just click on the link. We have Voice Message Monday, don't we, Dan? Do we drop in there?
We do. I usually put it in all socials as well, so if anyone wants to get involved, particularly with an upcoming episode where we'll be talking about our favourite noughties films.
Oh yeah, it's good. So we've done favourite 90s, favourite actions, and we're going to do favourite noughties films. So yeah, if you have anything you want to get in contact about, look out for the links in our bios most likely, and on there will take you to Anchor. You can use your mobile device and just leave a voicemail, much like you would do in the real world if you're weird and leave voice messages, because I don't know about you, Dan, but I don't leave voice messages these days. It's always WhatsApp. Or rather, I am. But if you are old school and need voice messages, you could do it that way. But sure enough, we have lifted, as Dan said, people into episodes, and it'd be really, really good to have you on there. So please do get in contact. We'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, yeah, look out for the socials. We'll have plenty of other topics coming up. But again, if you have any recommendations, anything that you want us to cover off or to investigate or to research, let us know. It is your podcast and your views, and we'd love to hear from you.
100%.
Lovely stuff. But for the first proper episode of On The Topic Pod, I've been Alex.
And I've been Dan.
And we'll see you next time.
Alexander Hamilton.